Welcome back, YouTube. Previous video was titled after the IHRA debacle that's going on right now. Now, the few of you that watched along, you understood that the World Drag Racing Series was something that was the World Drag Racing, not the association, but the alliance. The World Drag Racing Alliance, I even get it screwed up, was created before the IHRA purchased multiple different tracks across the nation. It was the threat of the World Drag Racing Alliance that caused the IHRA its demise of what we're seeing today. Because in order to keep out the competition, the IHRA aligned with the World Drag Racing Alliance. So those tracks I talked about before, those individual track owners, they had combined in an alliance. And after they created enough competition, the IHRA decided to purchase them. Now, just as for clarification in the last video, since then, Tony DeFaro from Uncle Tony's Garage did a follow-up because he was involved with the IHRA for multiple different years and explains within his most recent video of the ups and downs of why the IHRA went the way that it did. Now, we can take a YouTube content creator as part of it, but there's other personalities in the drag racing world that we can turn to. One of those other individuals that experienced the same kind of select personality is Mike Moran. So if you guys go back to the 1990s, Mike Moran competing in the fastest streetcar shootout, guy is fairly well known amongst other racers, Jim Carter, Pat Muncie. Again, it came down to the cars. People were more interested in the cars and the technology underneath the hood than actually who was driving the car. It was Mike Moran. That when he was eliminated from the races, Jim Carter could no longer drive his own car. He jumped into his car, and it was Red Nova, and won the competition. But again, it was the cars that made it. Again, for any one of you that have been in the drag racing series, who was the driver of the 3 USA drag racing cars that competed in the fastest streetcar shootouts? Can you name them? Or did you know them by the color of the car? Because 2 of them were Camaros. Who was behind the wheel? Who built those cars? Along with that, once Mike Moran got that recognition from winning and driving Jim Carter's car to the championship, a lot more attention was taken away from some of the bigger names. Names like Rod Sabery. Again, he took all these immaculate Corvettes, hacked them up, and turned them into race cars. He was one of the leading competitors with only using natural aspiration. So there was no nitrous, no power adders in his combinations. He was going for that weight to power ratio, and he had it figured out. What we're seeing today in the door slammers and the street outlaws competition, so on and so forth, those guys were doing it already back in the 80s on the streets of Chicago or streets of Detroit, to the point where their names were allowed them to get the customer recognition to where they could pay for the more expensive cars and equipment. Then they started picking up sponsors. Now, it didn't take very long before the rules were changed, and they were IHRA rules, trying to make the classes more restrictive, even to the aerodynamics. So we can go back to approximately a 5-year spread where IHRA banned multiple different racers from competing in their events. One of them being Mike Moran with his Casper Camaro. Racers were complaining about things as headlight covers, that they were illegal because they gave an unfair advantage to aerodynamics, even though Mike Moran was running the smallest cubic inch engine out of the entire field. Between Mike Moran, Steve Sabery, and there was another individual out of the Chicago area, Tom Nelson. They were the first ones to get into the turbo engine combination competition. There were guys doing it prior to that and, experimenting, but those are the first ones where you could go and actually buy a complete engine from their shops, equipped, in mass numbers that you could purchase. That was the boom of the turbo drag racing efforts. That was in the 1990s. Now, IHRA, once again, they were booting people out for all kinds of different rules and regulations. IHRA wouldn't allow Mike Moran to go compete in their events. Casper was limited to events that he was invited to. It wasn't a series where you ran for points or so on and so forth. Okay? Now, some of those events, there was other YouTube content creators that competed at those events, like Steve Morrison, R. Morrison, up until the early night, or approximately 2000, before one of the partners passed away, and 5 years later, the partner passed away. Both individuals that started R. Morrison left our world in approximately 2006, or by 2006. Racers are like Spears Papas. Going back to the Uncle Tony's Garage video, people got to know the drivers. It wasn't necessarily the cars, but there were still cars that brought names, because in the Fastest Street Car Shootout, you had multiple different body styles. You also have cars that were naturally aspirated competing against cars with power adders. It was a competition between which one can produce the most amount of power and the fastest car, and who is piloting it, because the cars were actually built by the drivers. What we're seeing in the 405 or whatever the Street Outlaws are doing, those cars also have names, such as Murder Nova or the Crow. But you also associate the cars to the owners, because the owners are the ones actually assembling the cars and tuning them. And then Uncle Tony's Garage mentioned something else that I disagree with. So again, we're kind of two peas in the pod. Street Outlaws at one time was just street driving. There was no prep necessarily included. They would, at certain events, depending on how much planning time they had, they could go out and put some track stick down on the surface of the roads. It's gotten to the point where even those cars are going to small or large wheel competitions. If you can make the list, how is that list identified? Is it by the name of the car or the driver? But the personalities you're able to view on TV. It was successful. But there's one thing that I disagree with Uncle Tony, saying that we're just at the beginning of the next evolution in drag racing. That tracks that have no prep, or they're only using the back end of the drag strip, that more of the attention is going to be going to that because of the flashy cars and the unique attachments these cars have, that they're literally on the edge of being out of control. Not on the edge. They are out of control. At almost every one of those events in the woods, cars are going over the barriers. Spectators are even being injured. So there's one thing that Uncle Tony has forgotten, and it's something that the NHRA, IHRA, AHRA, they've all had to deal with, and that's insurance. Even Street Outlaws are getting to the point where their local authorities know who they are, because their name is badged all over the internet and on TV. They have to be more inconspicuous of where they're actually going and running. It's to the point where local law authorities, or local law enforcement and authorities and insurance companies, are starting to shut them down, forcing street racers to go to drag racing events. The battle in the woods is probably the dumbest track to ever run at. And I know there's going to be thousands of you that disagree with that. That's exciting. You can be right up next to the cars. You can feel the flames even coming out of the bypass pipes of the turbos. You can see the tires start to squat and wrinkle. You can feel it in your soul because it's the impact on your chest. It's very exciting. But can you imagine how much that track has to pay in insurance? And when? At what point does the insurance say you are unsafe for the activities that you're carrying out? Folks, the future of drag racing is threatened, especially when racers are not held to a certain standard. IHRA blocked out individuals like Tony DeFaro and other individuals because they were known in the street racing world. They were known to be doing things illegally and then coming to the tracks and competing. Now, I had mentioned the World Drag Racing Alliance, the International Hot Rod Association, the National Hot Rod Association. There's one other drag racing sponsor, the IHRA, that I do not have any association with. Period. Because they were doing the exact same thing as what some of these non-prep tracks are doing. They were allowing cars on the drag strip with very little inspection. Cars are literally unsafe. They have drivers on the track that don't even have a driver's license. But because they are insured and they're only asking for insurance for maybe 1 or 2 days at their events, the insurance companies have no wind of what they've actually been doing. Once that was announced to some of the racers at these events, that they could be lined up with somebody with maybe even 4 out of the 5 lug nuts on their car, or there was nothing on the car that met any kind of spec, whether it's seat belts, quick release steering wheels, extinguish systems, parachutes, or tires that are literally DOT approved if they're radials, or wear marks in drag racing slicks that are next to the bands because they're so worn out. Those are the type of individuals you were lining up against at these IHRA events. Even individuals didn't show up because once local authorities found out that they were inviting individuals without a driver's license, they were waiting at the state line for those individuals to cross. Folks, drag racing, especially street racing, is a focal point of many local authorities. And the insurance companies are feeling tons of pressure to make sure that they're not covering anymore. Even the TV networks or the media networks, pay-per-view, they're being questioned on what they're covering within the racing events, whether they're illegal or organized or not. If they're not safe, insurance companies aren't going to cover them anymore. They're not going to cover any new organizations. So if the IHRA starts to close down all these different classes, maybe it's because of the insurance company saying, hey, you have a history of injuries or catastrophes occurring at this class. In order to retain your insurance, you need to close them down. That's precisely what is happening. Now, between the former female president of the IHRA to the new owner and manager of the IHRA, insurance companies have to be renewed within their contracts with every new owner. I believe since the purchase of the IHRA, the consumption of the World Drag Racing Alliance, the insurance companies all over them, they've jacked up their prices. And because of the lower class facilities that they're running at, the insurance companies are going even higher than what they're charging the National Hot Rod Association. There's a reason why the National Hot Rod Association requires so many safety inspections and updates of equipment is because it allows them to show a receipt to their insurance company saying, we are taking everything we can possibly do to make this activity safe. With safeguards being put into place not only in the driver, the car, or the track facilities themselves, they're paying less than any of the tracks associated with the IHRA or AHRA. So this is where I disagree with Uncle Tony's Garage, Tony DeFaro. We're not at the beginning of a new evolution in drag racing, especially when it comes to the IHRA. That's done and over with, folks. They're done. The next evolution, and this is something that even the NASCAR crowd is complaining about right now. They just lowered the horsepower rating of NASCARs below 500 horsepower. Okay. They believe it's more competitive, slowing the cars down. That's to drag the races out because they're not elapsing the circle in as quick at times. It's causing the races to be dragged out, driving up concession sales and TV time. It's not for safety. Again, whenever you throw politics into these racing events, it's doomed to fail. If there is a next evolution in either NASCAR or drag racing, it's going to be to the point where you're going to start seeing electric-powered vehicles. They're going to be on board to the point where even you sitting at home in your recliner, you're going to be able to get behind the wheel of a car. You are literally going to be able to sit and steer, even using your phone or your tablet as the steering wheel. You're going to be able to control a car, electric car, that's on the track. So even if there is some bumping and grinding that there is in racing, and there's a catastrophe that totals out the car, there's no human life involved with it. That's the evolution of automobile racing. That's why multiple individuals over the last 15 years have actually gotten away from organized racing. They've turned to specific events, like mountain climbing events, mud races. They're getting more amped up to where they're going to local one-time events that are not associated with any kind of organization. We're seeing a huge abundance of individuals switching into the tractor pull arena. Both cars and tractors, business is off the hook. Individuals out of Missouri, individuals out of Texas, bringing their equipment to our shop to be modified to the extent that they can handle 120 to 150 psi of boost. They're not going 100 or 200 miles an hour down an eighth or a quarter mile. They're releasing the full amount and horsepower output of those engines for 300 feet. And the closest a spectator can get is 100 feet away. Those events are being carried out at local county fairs. The numbers are growing. There are more people at tractor pulls than there is at drag races. Because the insurance companies haven't caught on to it yet, and they don't impose as much risk. All of these drag racing or circle track racing events, the insurance companies are dictating how they're being run. Every racing track in the United States is bowing to the insurance companies over their facilities. Locally, it used to cost just $1 million a year. Okay, just one circle track locally here. It took $1 million a year just to have an EMT and a vehicle on site, required by the insurance company. The insurance for just the track, for liability or racer safety, was over $5 million a year. When you're only bringing in $750,000 of total intake revenue per year, you can't afford $5 million in insurance. They have to look for all kinds of substitute funding avenues. Every time they have an injury, whether it's a spectator or a racer, their insurance is always be threatened to be dropped. They have to turn to a different insurance supplier that immediately says, hey, this one just cut you out. In order to even have insurance to continue operating, we're going to charge you at least 30% more. With every accident. Forbid if somebody actually dies. So that's where I disagree with Tony DeFaro. It's to the point where you can't afford it. Not only in the parts and maintenance of a vehicle or the building or project of a vehicle, the cost of entry fees to get into the track, for spectators to come watch, it's getting to the point where the tracks can't afford to even keep running. Is there a future in NASCAR and drag racing here in the United States? It's on limited time. It's going to get to the point where the individual, the human being, is taken right out of the car. One of the last drag racers, within the last year and a half, they had any kind of chance of being an influence into the future of drag racing would be John Force. He's no longer able to get behind the wheel of a car because of his injuries. He just came out this morning with an address towards the IHRA drag racing, debacle that's going on right now. He's continuing to run John Force race team while he is technically retiring. He's handing the torch down to his kids, and multiple of his daughters have already retired from drag racing. There's a small select few that is still keeping it running. And it's mostly sponsorship money that's keeping it going. But even the sponsors are not getting enough airtime and product support to continue funding racing. The future of drag racing, automobile racing, is threatened to no longer exist. There's always going to be the select few in states where you can get away with it. But there are states right now trying to limit the age of the car that you drive. Or that if it's modified in any manner, it's not street legal. The government's already in on it. It's not just the government's dictation over the auto manufacturers. And within their safety equipment they have to have in new vehicles. They're going after the antiques. They're going after the muscle cars. They're going after the high-powered personal transports. The last place we'll actually see a gasoline-powered vehicle will be in racing. I project that by 2035, less than 10 years from now, government's going to get its way. And drag racing and circle track racing as we know it today will no longer exist, and there won't be a future type of human racing. It could happen. So I believe it was either yesterday or today was the anniversary of the death of Dale Earnhardt Sr. Approximately 2 weeks ago was the anniversary of the death of, excuse me, probably one of my favorite drivers, Davey Ellison. Go back to the heyday of NASCAR. Again, it wasn't necessarily about the drivers. Or was it? Was it about the sponsors on the cars, or was it the competition between the manufacturers, Ford or Chevy? Can you honestly look at the 6th generation car today and tell what kind of car it is unless you see the fake sticker or nose cone on the car? If they were to put the exact same nose cone and stickers on the Generation 6 car, you wouldn't know what type of engine is underneath the hood. Even the Generation 6 car, it's becoming that military airplane fuselage where basically the driver's cockpit is surrounded by a titanium case where the front end can be unbolted and the rear end can be taken off and swapped out in a matter of seconds. It's all over the safety. It's been going on for a long time. Long time. Even going back to the 90s. When a simple piece of plastic over a set of headlights disqualified you from a race. Today it's going to be if you have one accident where one driver or one spectator is hurt, even minor, you're shut down permanently. War in the woods, folks, I see it right now. By the end of next year, that facility will be completely shut down by local authorities and insurance companies. It's not going to exist after 2027. It's not going to. Individuals are going to be forced to go back to the streets. Stoplight to stoplight. Now I'm going to end the video on this. Just like Uncle Tony said that because he was associated with street racing and the local organizations like the IHRA found out about it, that he couldn't compete with them anymore. When it comes to no prep racing, where locals are going out to be a fee, whether it's brand new blacktop or, fairly good condition road coverings, once your car gets over 600 horsepower or is capable of doing a 6-second or faster eighth mile, or even faster than, say, 11-second quarter mile, if you're doing that on the street, like 2-lane blacktop, where the distance between the two cars is less than 6 feet, people are going to get killed. How do I know? Because at one point, I was also a street racer. You know what stopped me from racing on the streets? The loss of a very close friend. So no, Tony, I believe you're wrong.